We have such fun, don't we? We have such fun. Here we are. Let's try it again. Probably not a great idea to turn the drive off. Now I know better. Now, usually don't have to access files like this. So let me just say one thing in my own defense here, okay? Just in my own defense. Ustream Producer is not what I would call a robust program. It is, without question, it is the pickiest software I have ever used. It's simply anything hiccups and it just stops. It just goes down. So anyway, there we go. Let's try again, shall we? We're going to do the office walkthrough. Apologies in advance for the crummy sound, but hopefully we'll get a little picture this time, and we'll see what we get. Ready? Here we go. Hey everybody, it's Bill Whittle. We're in the new office space, the new studio space we've been talking about for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now, 9 years, something like that. We finally got it. I know it's spectacular. I know what you're thinking. Look at these black walls that we have here. The stuff's all torn out here. We've got more lovely black walls over here. The former tenants, it turned out, was a satanic cult that was in here using this place for human sacrifice. Now, that's where we got a pretty decent rate on it because your money's valuable to us. We don't want to be spending it hither and yon. You can see here where the fingerprints, the claw marks of the victims as they were being taken off to whatever horrible fate they were intended for. I don't know. There's carpets in terrible shape. You can see stains down here. We'll just call these, we'll call them food stains. It's easier on the nerves that way, I think. But you can see we've got this lovely black wall with this yellow thing here. Somewhere over here, we've got a room that's painted like super bright canary yellow to keep them docile, I think, mostly to keep them docile and somewhat contented. So I don't know what went on here, but it's obviously not very pretty. I'll walk you through, then I'll tell you what we're going to do. Got this little space over here, and back through there, the office we're in Sherman Oaks. This office space goes to like Tarzana. It's amazing. But we're just going to put a wall like bingo right here. And then if you come over here, you can see this is going to be where the administrative offices are. We have a little glass plane here so that, you're not going to be able to actually talk to us in person. We're not idiots. But we have a glass plane here so that you can, make your entreaties and your pleas up against a glass pane. I'll show you what that looks like, actually. Okay, so that's what it is now. I'm going to show you what we're going to try and do with it in the mind. So here's the deal. First of all these black walls are going to disappear. We're going to go with like a dove gray, something lighter. This horrible, nasty kind of carpet's going to be replaced by maybe a nice charcoal gray. So instead of earth tones, we'll go with kind of grays. Gray walls. We're going to put a great suggestion to put the Stratosphere lounge couch out to here and over here. So it's filling this corner. Kind of gray walls here. We'll do the LED light strips here like we did in the Stratosphere lounge office. And then over here, up high, we're going to have a green screen pull down. We're going to do the firewalls over at the studio we used to use before, but we'll do time on target here, right in front of this green screen thing. We shoot it, and we roll it right back up again. So this will be a nice kind of a gray wall. And then, this is going to be cool. This wall over here, the wall of human despair, we'll have a shaman come in and kind of, see if they can pull the tormented souls of whatever happened to you out of the room. But when they're done, we're going to turn this whole thing into the Stratosphere Lounge graphics. So you're going to see you see the mountains, and there'll be the test pattern, and then off from the wall, backlit with those glowing LEDs, we'll have the Stratosphere Lounge, and we'll have little tiny scale model Bills standing here, and they'll have a glow around them. So we shoot the Stratosphere Lounge. We'll get to shoot the Stratosphere Lounge against the Stratosphere Lounge graphic. That'll be awesome. It'll be killer. It'll be great. So again, lighter walls over here. And here, we're going to turn this room, which is really just a room, honestly, not much to it, just a kind of a square room. Put a little refrigerator in there, but mostly, this is where our inventory is going to be. We're going to have all the shirts laid out and little shelves, and everything's going to be great. We're a little short on these, a little long on those. We have everything there so we can get your stuff out that day. That's the plan. We have everything, and so we're going to have inventory, and now we have shelves to put the inventory on. Probably put a little breakfast nookie kind of thing over here, a little place to, put a little high table and some chairs and have a little glass of orange juice. In the management office here, we're hoping to have a couple of desks and work on things like the Stratuscon from here, and we'll do the offices from here, and we'll do all kinds of things. And let's turn the lights on. They're on, I think. So maybe put the BillWhittle.com banner over this room here. white walls, color accents, and this will be kind of the nerve center of everything. I'll come around this way like this. Again, maybe, I don't know, we may even put a plant in here. It'd be something fun to do, come in every day, watch the plant die. So we could keep these windows open when we want to, close them when we don't want to. Camera setup will go here. We'll have blackout curtains to black this place out. Camera will be set up here so we can shoot time over target that way. And here, now in my primitive male brain, I originally envisioned putting my editing table against the wall, so I've got all this awesome office space and I'd spend my entire day not seeing an inch of it. God knows what kind of shenanigans could be going on literally behind my back. Probably people walking out of my office with my money that they've extorted from me in their hands, $100 bills right out the door. I'd have no way of knowing. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that table off the wall, move it out, maybe you can put it at an angle like this. So we'll be able to do the editing right here, shoot the stuff over there, and that would mean that this whole area over here will be kind of a groovy, kind of an open space lounge where people can come and hang out and have a good time and relax. And we got the means to actually do what we said we're going to do, which is get out daily content twice a day, time over target once a day in the morning, bill me once a day in the afternoons, and a firewall a week, plus all the PJTV stuff. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, that's the office. We'll give you updates as we go, but I thought you'd want to see it in all of its horrible, horrible glory before we started to do our little magic on it. As always, we couldn't do it without you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Just shoot me in the head. Just go ahead and shoot me in the head. I'm gonna just edit this whole thing down, and you know what? No one's gonna know. And all of you are gonna be laughing, but it's gonna be like, no, I'm gonna look very, very professional. I'll fix it in post. I'll fix it in post because I can. Anyway, God. What the hell was All right. All I was saying is this. You kind of have visions of what you want, in the future, and you kind of think it's, one day it's going to be like this. And what actually happens is, it happens like incrementally, little steps. When I moved into this office 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I couldn't believe it. It was so great, so much better than the garage we were working out of, and that was better than not working. And so it's just really, really cool. We're gonna do a bunch of updates on that site. We're gonna let everybody kind of watch it get together, and I'd like to think that we can have open house days where people can just drop by. I've always felt that this is kind of our company, not in a legally binding way, but certainly in an emotional way. It would be nice to have a room where we could bring people over and, maybe just have a visiting day, and Speakeasy is going to be fun. That'll be worth the drive. It would really, really be great to have, 100 people in a room. And who knows, if we can keep booking them, we'll just get bigger spaces. It'd be really, really, really fun. So, anyway, that office space is horrible with the black walls, and the stains and the canary yellow. I just, for the life of me, don't know what, they had in there. But with that said, it's going to be really cool. The second I walked in there, I could just completely see it. It's perfect for us. About 1,400 square feet. Right now, I'm in 300 square feet, and we're gonna have a blast in there. So, and we'll do some good work too, and we'll do all those things. Anyway, it's time to move on and start getting some questions taken here. It's once again, it's the Tiemann's Hour, and we'll deal with the Tiemann's and their multiplicity of questions in a moment. However, we do have to say, we being the regal we, my tapeworm and they're usually excellent questions. So the top ranked question for Stratosphere Lounge episode 70 is, have you checked your privilege today? That comes from Zechariah Tiemens. Excuse me. No, I haven't checked my privilege today. Because I'm sorry. Wes Walker in the comments section said, 900 square feet, 300 square feet, luxury. For Yorkshiremen, I think I put a link to that not too long ago. It's one of the great sketches of all time. If you really want a good laugh, just Google For Yorkshiremen and try and get the black and white version with John Cleese, Graham Chapman, somebody else, and Marty Feldman. Really awesome. Anyway, have I checked my privilege today? No, Zachariah, I have not checked my privilege today. Watching the progressives in America is like watching a lake dry up. As more and more people flee and evaporate away from this absurdity, what you're left with is an ever more alkaline, salty, unlivable, briny, awful puddle. And that's really what looks like is happening to me. I'll get to the privilege again in a second. I caught a story a couple days ago on these trigger warnings, where somebody, one of these precious snowflakes, and I'm not so much referring to millennials here as I'm referring to feminists, said, well, Great Gatsby contains scenes of violence and so on, and you might read the Great Gatsby and it might trigger a traumatic response. So I did a afterburner, wrote an afterburner called Eloy, and I won't give you any more than that, but those of you who can make the connection should be pretty clear. And I really love it. And I thought this trigger warning thing was just a real small little passing thing, but everybody's on it. Everybody's all over it. Because it's absurd. It's ridiculous. We have to put warning labels on literature now because people are so hysterical that that if they read something they don't like, they have a panic attack. And I get into the whole reason why that is biologically, and I'll let you see the afterburner, which will be up tomorrow, next day. So back to the privilege thing. The privilege thing is part of this mental decay and increasing hysteria. And if you look at, everybody's so, I know our team is really down, and we've been fighting this for 5 years and seeing all these awful things happening. But guys, honestly, the president has now gotten a reputation for incompetence, and that's because that's his only defense. After Fast and Furious and Benghazi and the Obamacare launch and now the VA thing, he's either completely evil or he's incompetent, and people know it. So, he's getting a reputation for incompetence, and as this progressive agenda continues to dissolve, they have to get more and more and more hysterical. It's kind of a almost like a feedback thing. It's like what's the word? Oh my gosh. You build up a tolerance. You do a certain hit of heroin, and after a while it doesn't do it for you, and you needs more, and you need more, and you need more, and you need more just to get the same high you got before. Now this process has been going on for decades now. Decades. I'm going to do a video called King of the Hills, where I talk about the reason we're conservatives is because increasing activism is now leading to a worse life, not a better life. Most of us were liberals when increasing activism meant people's lives were getting better. The EPA did a lot of good back in the 70s when lakes were filled with mercury and rivers caught fire, and they cleaned up the environment. That's great. But the EPA didn't say, well, we're done. We'll keep a staff of 5 to make sure that everything's humming along, but we did get the mercury out of the rivers, and business rock on. No, now they get more and more and more absurd and spend more and more money and more effort to achieve smaller and smaller gains. And when you have something like an activist movement, and I worked for women for most of my life, most of my professional life. I just got in touch with a producer who I worked with on Sunday Morning Shootout, starting in 2003. So, this business about, glass ceilings and this fictional women make 78 cents for every dollar men make, it's just not true.
It's true they make less money than men, but they make less money than men because they put in less overtime and they have less dangerous jobs. So it's just not true. So if you're a feminist, you've got to have something, right? You can't just declare victory, because if you declare victory, you can't be a victim anymore. And if you're not a victim, then what power do you have? So you have to constantly ramp up the outrage, and you have to get more and more outraged over sillier and sillier things. So now we're back to this white privilege and check your privilege and speciesism and ableism and all this other stuff. All it is what it's always been: political correctness and victimization, and it's really a twofold, a double-edged attack here. Zach, can I call you Zach? If it was Zach, I'd call you Zach, but Zechariah. It's a double-edged thing, because there's two things that are going on here when they start screeching about privilege. The first thing that's going on is they are maintaining a level of outrage in their own community, which gives them and their pathetic, empty, pitiful lives meaning. You know, that's what are you? What's your life about? I'm a feminist. Really? I'm a Republican. It's not my life. It's not my identity. You know, I'm a conservative. I happen to make a living being conservative, but if somebody said, what do you, Bill, tell me about yourself, I wouldn't say I'm a committed conservative. It's trivial compared to the totality of my personal identity. But that's not true for these people. There are guys like Touré on MSNBC. He's a professional race victim. That's all he is. That's all he does is talk about slavery. Talks about something that happened 7 generations ago. You know, chances are pretty good. He's probably looked it up, but chances are better than average that his parents were never slaves. So what do you say about this? So on one level, it's an attempt to maintain kind of a political power base. But on a deeper level, these people really mean it. They really mean it. They really think that some people are doing well and they're not doing well because of this white skin privilege. It's not true. It's not true. Some people do well because they work very hard, and other people don't do well because they don't work very hard. And there is, without question, a time in America, without question, no question, a time in America for hundreds of years where if you were black, that meant you didn't have a chance to succeed in America in anything like the way we understand it. But those days are well behind us. They're 2 generations behind us now. Without question, being black is an advantage today in America. There's no question about it. It's absolutely not up for discussion. It's an advantage in terms of your programs and your educational programs. It's an advantage in terms of your access and your admission to schools. It's an advantage in terms of your hiring. It's an advantage all across the board. Because of this diversity fetish that we have, we are basically, we're shamed into hiring people who are not as fit for the job as other applicants. And all of this just does nothing but pull the average down. So I'll just close with something I've talked about before. But, you know, the reason we do this show is so that, you know, I can refine and hone these arguments and you guys can ammo up. But you can't talk about this. You can't talk about this idea of white skin privilege and black victimization in America. You cannot talk about it. They don't want you to talk about it, period. Their attitude would be, if you're white, you can't talk about it because you didn't have the black experience in America. It's like, you were never called the N-word. And I don't like referring to the N-word like I'm 4 years old, but I wouldn't say the F-word on this show either, so we'll just leave it there for the time being. But you were never called the N-word because you're white. True enough. You were never beat up because you were white by groups of black people in a high school. Were you? Because we were. So, you know what? Instead of me making my life about getting knocked over in junior high by black guys because I was white, instead of me making my life about that, I just got over it. And not only did I get over it, I didn't judge every single black person by that experience because I don't see people that way. What do you think of black people? Who are you talking about? Which one are you talking about? Some I like, some I don't. Some gay people I like, some gay people I don't. It's going to come as a tremendous shock to progressives, but there's an awful lot of white Christian males I don't like at all. So there you go. So anyway, to the point, you cannot talk about race in America without understanding this, because it's important and it's great ammunition. There was a debate, an actual debate, that went on for several years about what post-Civil War Black America was going to be and how they were going to get there, what they were going to do. And there were two schools, and one school was headed by W.E.B. Du Bois. And his attitude was, we should demand immediate civil rights from the white community, and that we will have what he called the talented 10%, the smartest 10% of the black population, will basically go and get these goodies from the Great White Father and distribute them out to the black population in America, and that would be the method by which Black America would be raised and integrated into mainstream American society after the Civil War. And his attitude was an elitist attitude. His attitude was a bottleneck attitude, meaning that the power was maintained by small groups of intellectual elitists who were bringing home the bacon and handing it out to their people. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar to you. It was commonly assumed that the way that you would get the most benefits out of this kind of emotional sort of appeal, that's the nicest way you could put it, it's more like blackmail really, the W.E.B. Du Bois attitude was the more we can make white America feel guilty, the more we'll be able to get from them. So this basically turned into the cult of victimization, and that was the position of W.E.B. Du Bois, which turned out to be the position that won. But, and this is the part where you really honestly have to get down to brass tacks here, but standing opposite him was one of the greatest Americans who's ever lived, and his name was Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington started a Tuskegee Institute. And Booker T. Washington's attitude was, no. We're victims of prejudice. So we cannot overcome prejudice by being weak and victims. If we're going to overcome prejudice, we not only have, we're not going to ask not to do as well as white people. If we're going to overcome prejudice, we have to do better than them. We're going to have to show them that we are not only their equals, but we can beat them at their own game if we apply ourselves. And Booker T. Washington believed that because unlike W.E.B. Du Bois and unlike Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Barack Obama and Touré and all the rest of these guys, Booker T. Washington actually believed that black people were equal. He actually believed it, and I believe it too. So he didn't have any problem with this. And if you'd said to him, we want a world where a white student needs an 800 to get into college, but a black kid can get in for 650 on an SAT, Booker T. Washington's head would have come off. He would have said, no. If white kids need 800 to get into a university, then we need to set the standard for black students to be at 1,000. We have to show them that we are equal to them and better than them, and not necessarily better, but certainly we are fully deserving of a place at the table here. So this debate went on and on and on. And Booker T. Washington at the Tuskegee Institute had black students who not only scored higher than white students all across the country, not only had better academic scores, but their legitimacy rate was pretty much 100%. They were all married. They were all decent, hardworking people. And Booker T. Washington had the audacity to say that what he thought should happen to black America was the slaves who had just been liberated should actually go back to their plantations and work them as farmers, save their money, buy some land, so that the slave generation that didn't have any skills whatsoever would in fact be farmers because that's what they were, but their kids would be mechanics and their kids would be doctors. And they would have their own economy, they would have their own economic strength, they would build from the bottom up, not drop it down from the top with little presents, and they would basically enter white society as equals because they had economic power and they had economic interest that was self-generated and they had money that they had earned and created and that white people would want through trade the same way we want anybody else's money through trade. So you had these two opposing views of how to handle this. And the catastrophe of American history is that we ended up with what we ended up with. And it was really due to Lyndon Johnson, who understood he was a racist, and all of those Southern Democrats, Bull Connor and Lester Maddox and George Wallace, all of those people turning the fire hoses on black people, they're all Democrats. The KKK were Democrats. The Jim Crow laws were Democrats. And they say on the progressive left, well, they switch teams. We switch sides. That's a nice thing to say. If your team just got walloped by 70 points, you know, we didn't really lose. We just came out in different uniforms. We actually won. Nonsense. What happened was Lyndon Johnson understood that without all of the black vote, the Democrats were never going to win again. So he basically bought them. And what he did cognizantly. He was cognizant of this. This is why it's so evil. Okay? It's so evil. Because Johnson knew that by providing all of these entitlement programs, he was in fact turning them back into slaves, turning them back into dependent, angry, bitter, envious people who waited in line to get a handout. He knew what he was doing, and he did it anyway. Appalling. Appalling. I'll take that argument anywhere. So I don't want to hear about my white skin privilege. You know the privilege I have? I have the hard work privilege. That's my privilege. I have the hard work privilege. I work 7 days a week. I go home at 2 o'clock in the morning most days. I work like an animal. And I have a new Camaro and a small airplane that costs about what a decent sports car would cost. Because I've been practicing before I actually started working and really hitting my stride, and I'm starting to feel my full powers coming together. So look, we lose because we let them intimidate us into thinking they're right. They're not right. They're not right, and they're not morally correct. They're evil, lazy people. Not black people, progressives. Progressives. Evil, lazy, envious people who take by force what they can't make on their own. Hope that straightens it out for you. Paul Sullivan says, you have said that America is an idea, and I agree. So besides America, what is the most American country? Question mark. A couple people said maybe Australia. I would agree on a lot of levels that Australia is probably culturally more like America than any place in the world. I've been to Australia. I loved Australia. I loved Australians. You know, you get down there and it's like, it's really like America, except, I mean, they got the same fast food things that we have. The difference is that Burger King is called Captain Jack's because apparently they have a problem with kings in Australia. No problem there. And all of the food tastes like it's just not quite there. I don't know how else to describe it. If you're Australian and you're watching this, let me tell you, I love Australia. I love the Australian people. I think it's just a magnificent, fun, awesome place. But you go to get and by the way, I understand fully that I'm comparing Australian fast food to American fast food on American brands. But for example, if you go to Australia and you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, where here in America they use 7 herbs and spices, in Australia they use 3. I was down there for 3 months in Brisbane, and we went out to dinner a couple times. And this is you know how I feel about this diversity fetish. We should have a competence fetish. But I will say this about this, and this is not enforced diversity. See, this is not like we must hire a certain number of blacks or Mexicans or whatever. This is the actual genuine benefit of America being a multicultural society, because when you really get down to it, up until like very recently, we weren't a multicultural society. People think we were, but we weren't. It's true that we were a nation of Irish and Germans and English and Italians and Chinese and Spanish and all those other things. And it looks like it's multicultures and multi-languages. But actually, we're one culture. We were a culture of risk takers. We were a culture of people who decided to get up and go to something else different. It's a monoculture, America. It's just different skin and different languages. But the culture, the idea is uniform. Used to be, anyway. So you've got this idea of a country comprised of people who make the same choice. I'm going to go someplace I've never been before because I want something better. And that is an idea. And that's what America is. So anyway, when you go to Australia, you see a country that's very much like America. We have a lot in common. First of all, we're all part of the Anglosphere. That's enormously important. We all have that same idea of law and decency and morality that comes from the British. They're just amazing people. You know, there's a lot of, needless to say, you hear nothing but anti-colonialism, and there's no question that the British especially did in fact do what America's accused of but doesn't do. The British did in fact go and suck resources out of places like India and all around the world and just ship it back home. We do the opposite. We pay for this stuff, and we usually overpay. With that said, the British have a history of that, but the British also did in fact bring civilization and the rule of law, the British sense of fundamental decency and the fundamental sense of fairness and fair play is what made the world what it is today. That British sense of law and order and decency and playing by the rules. And a lot of people talk about all the horrible things that the British did in India, and massacre of 500 people or whatever it was. And I don't for a second mean to downplay that. But the British ended sati. The British ended the most rampant racism that the world has ever seen, which is Indian castes are just the people are literally untouchable. You simply have to wash your hands if you look at them, kind of thing. So they accomplish an awful lot. So we have that in common with the Australians. Now, one thing we have in common with the Australians that the Canadians don't have in common with us is we and the Australians have both had the pleasure of shooting at guys in redcoats, and that's an awful fun thing to do. And so we've got that kind of rebellious sort of thing in Canada. Of course, is the Canada's kind of the kind of the middle brother kind of thing, who's like, okay, Mom. No offense, Canada. But I would say Australia is much more like us culturally. And the only reason I say that is because I don't think they're most like us culturally. And we're talking about culturally. I would have to say on some level, you could take what I think makes up America and sort of break it up. I think on one level, Japan is most like us. And that's not a coincidence, because Japan was a very proud culture that were utterly defeated. And they understood that they were going to become, MacArthur just basically dictated their constitution. If you look at Japan, as opposed to China, which in my opinion is a very parasitical, cheap kind of copy, kind of steal secrets, cheap knockoff piracy kind of thing. The Japanese, on the other hand, are magnificent inventors, technicians, and engineers. Not so much inventors, technicians and engineers. They refine technology in a way that I've never seen, and they are superb manufacturers. It's almost like the soul of American manufacturing just left America, went to Japan. They do terrific, terrific work. They're much more like us than the Australians are in an economic sense. I've been to Australia. I like Australia very, very much. But honestly, you can't get anything done in that country. You can have a meeting on Monday and you won't get anything done until Thursday of the following week. It's unbelievable. So in one way, I think Japan is more like America. I think in a lot of ways, Eastern Europe is very much more American, because there's a great deal in Eastern Europe that understands oppression and tyranny and communism, and in a sort of a, mental ally kind of a sense. I think Poland and the Czech Republic are very Western in a way that England and France and even Germany aren't. Germany's such a hybrid, and needless to say, you would want to put Britain at the top of this pile. But I really genuinely do believe that if Western civilization does come crashing down into ruins, it will be to the sound of that snooty, stuffy, morally superior BBC announcer voice. That arrogant, above it all, seen it all, so much smarter, so much better than you, that BBC kind of, multicultural sort of, go to hell, honestly. Self-hating, smarmy, politically correct, oh, you brutish Americans, oh, you this, we're so advanced. You're not advanced at all. You're cowards, and you're failures, and you're weak, and you have a death wish, and you don't just want to go down yourself. You want to take everybody with you. It's just really sad. Anyway, that's that, Paul. Moving on. Kenny Dragone says, hey, it looks like you're working closely with Ted Cruz. Does he have any big plans for you? Campaign manager, running mate, limo driver? Well, certainly not campaign manager, and it's certainly not running mate. I have not officially, formally worked with Ted. We've discussed it. I need to get out there and talk to him. I've been a little bit too busy for that right now. That's funny, isn't it? I'm a little too busy to go out and talk to the man who I think is going to be the next president of the United States. Let me tell you what, there is some connection to Ted Cruz and I. It's actually started out very informally. I didn't even know who he was a year or two ago. I was at an event that he was at, and I was very impressed by him. And I said a couple things, and he was impressed by some of those things. Then we had another thing where I cannot for the life of me remember whether I introduced him or whether I followed him. But I do remember it was behind a big projection screen, and he was watching what I was saying, and I was talking about culture war and the Rebel Alliance and Tea Party and all that other stuff. And he really liked that, and he included that in some of his filibuster. And he said he's continued to use these kind of pop cultural references. So there's that. And then, of course, I went out and introduced him back a couple months ago when I was, calling for the actual murder of Americans, according to Daily Kos. I was actually seriously calling for people to open up on those cars with mortar rounds and rocket-propelled grenades, because that's the kind of awful, evil person I am. And, they went after Ted for that. The reason they went after me on this, because, hey, the audience knew I was kidding. Ted Cruz knew I was kidding. I knew I was kidding. And Daily Kos knows I was kidding. But they played it seriously because they wanted to hurt Ted Cruz. And I was afraid maybe they did. So I finally caught up with him about a month ago here in L.A. And he came out, and we were sitting next to each other at the table, and I leaned over and said, "Hey, Ted, I hope I didn't cause you any, trouble with that." And he just started laughing. I said, No. It was hilarious. We still talk about it. We talk about it all the time. We joke about it all the time. I think it was just terrific and wonderful. And that's when I really liked him even better, because I'd known that he was very smart from the beginning. And the thing about Ted Cruz, when you meet him in person, just sitting in the audience watching him, you'll get this sense, is he's just such a decent guy. He's such a genuinely decent, caring guy. And when you talk to him in person, you realize he genuinely is. He's probably too nice for the job. If I were to give him advice, I would toughen him up a little bit. I'd make him a little more alpha. He's actually too sweet for this job. But when I heard him say, no, on the contrary, we all just laughed. I realized, no, this guy's a warrior. He's a fighter. He's not beholden to his enemy's opinion of him in the way that Boehner is and McConnell is and Romney was and McCain was. He's not beholden to his enemy's opinion of them, and he's also smart enough to realize that Ted Cruz could say nothing but nice things about progressives, and they'd hate him anyway. So Ted Cruz doesn't care. He goes out there and he speaks the truth. I think he's going to be the next president, and I wouldn't mind being friends with the guy who's the next president. The thing about Ted, and the reason I think he's going to be the president, is number one, he's not afraid to face the issues. He's not afraid to stand up for things and believe in what he believes in. Ted is blindingly smart. Somebody just pointed out in the comment section that Harvard law professors called him, what was the word? Simply brilliant, extremely brilliant, simply brilliant. That's coming from Harvard law professors. Now, the current president also went to Harvard Law, but Ted Cruz graduated, it was either magna or summa cum laude. I want to say magna cum laude from Harvard Law. The president of the United States presumably graduated from Harvard with grades that are still sealed. And if they were straight A's, I don't think they'd be sealed. So Ted Cruz is 100 times smarter than Barack Obama, and he's far smarter than Hillary Clinton. Ted Cruz is an actual Hispanic. Ted Cruz has a gentleness and a toughness, a mental toughness. I think he's going to do it. I really think he's going to do it. I don't think anybody wants another 3 years of this or 4 years of this, and I think that's 2 years away. I think we get 2 more years of lame duck presidency. I think the wheels are just going to completely come off of them. So I think he's going to do it. And unlike, the Republican GOP establishment says, well, your Tea Party candidates are also rough-hewn and you have no chance to win and it's just a question of self-destruct and so on and so on and so on. Well, Ted Cruz is not rough-hewn. Ted Cruz is not untested. Ted Cruz is not what they want to portray as a Tea Party lunatic. Ted Cruz argued the case for Texas in front of the Supreme Court and won. So I think he's going to be the next deal. So in terms of what I would be able to do with him, he asked me if I would come out and talk with him about just general things. We've got a midterm election coming up. But after that, I would love to talk to him. And what I'd like to talk to him about is I would like to talk to him about here's how you make the argument. I want to be crystal clear on this. I don't have to tell Ted Cruz anything about the positions he holds. On the contrary, Ted Cruz can educate me in a very deep and extensive way about positions that I hold. I'm not telling Ted Cruz what to think or I'm telling Ted Cruz what to believe. Ted Cruz can give me a significant boost in that department. But what I can do is is I can provide a rhetorical casing that will be effective and accessible so that we can talk about what those combined shared values are. And I think I can help him put them in ways that are easily understood and accessible and fun and intelligent and clever and interesting and hip. So it would be my great pleasure and honor to do that. I certainly don't have any official association with him, and nor have I been offered one. Just so we're crystal clear on that. But of all the people out there in the field, he's the one I like the most, the one I trust the most, and the one who I have the highest level of confidence in. So go Ted. I think he's going to do it. Charles Strickland says, flat tax or consumption tax? Charles, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we did take him in order. I would prefer a consumption tax. And the answer I don't want to spend too much time on it is because I don't know an awful lot about this. The one thing I do know is whatever it is, it needs to be a non-progressive tax. Everybody has to pay it. Exemptions for certain things, if you're in extreme poverty, but everybody has to pay it, and everybody has to pay it at the same rate, because the bludgeon of progressivism is envy. And as long as there are rich people and poor people, and a clear line dividing the two, there will be this class warfare when there wasn't class warfare before. But if everybody's paying the same rate, then no longer are you suddenly rich if you're above $250,000 and poor if you're below it, or whatever the number happens to be. Everybody pays the same rate. And that's all I can give you on this one, I'm afraid, Charles. I would prefer consumption, because a consumption tax, you control. You control how much tax you pay. If you don't want to buy something big, then you don't pay much taxes and many taxes. And if you do want to buy something big or lots of things because you have more money available, you pay more. And the nice thing about that is, I think it would just really stimulate the economy. A flat tax would stimulate the economy. Anything would stimulate the economy. And frankly, I'm not even interested in stimulating the economy anymore. I'm not even interested in fairness. I'm not interested in any of this stuff anymore. I'm interested in it, but they've all come distant second to the fact that I do not like my government weaponized against me. So goodbye, IRS. And by the way, if you want to know how incompetent the Republican leadership is now, if you can't win over the American people with a plan to abolish the Internal Revenue Service, you probably should be in a different line of work. If you can't get that right, you really should be in another line of work. So that's it. Jacob Belchak says, it's my turn for RK. Hooray! Excuse me, just getting rid of the last of this little cough here. Is it possible for K instincts to be overdeveloped where the desire to compete overrides common human courtesy? Is violent crime an outgrowth of bad K or simply repressed K? Can repressed K be cured? I'm not a complete expert on this yet, but I have been thinking about very little else. The question is, does the desire to compete override common human courtesy? The thing that's important in this is to understand that both the desire to compete and common courtesy are both exclusively K characteristics. Our selected species don't compete. They're competition, and I got to be clear about this. It makes it sound like they're so inferior, but R makes perfect sense, or else R wouldn't exist. If R wasn't the right thing to do under certain circumstances, there'd be no R. There'd be no R species. There'd be no R psychological attractors in humans. So, if there is, in fact, endless resources, competition is not only not good, it's foolish. It's a waste of time. You could get hurt, and it gets you nothing. You just take a hop over to the left and continue eating. Competition is a result of scarce resources and the desire to produce fit offspring. Fitness is what drives competition. Contests of fitness. And fit people, I don't mean physically fit, I mean, or even genetically fit, I mean survivally fit. People who know how to survive, people who are good with with trading and people who can, do things. K-selected species like wolves are the wolves and other pack animals. The predators are the ones that have the social rules. They're the ones that have all of the, the inhibitions against aggression. If two wolves get into a dominance fight, they'll tear each other up until one of them realizes he's losing. He goes into a submission pose, shows his neck or whatever, and it deactivates the other wolf, just deactivates them. So we are wired, K-type humans are wired to obey the rules. And courtesy is rules. Courtesy and etiquette and politeness and manners are observance of rules that are designed to lubricate actions between individuals and stop those rough edges from causing us to start, baring our fangs at each other. But just because progressives aren't competitive doesn't mean they're kind. If they were kind, there wouldn't be 250 million dead people as a result of progressivism being shot in the back of the head. Progressives don't have these things. They don't have a respect for law. They don't have a respect for courtesy. Somebody sent me a link to a program that that this guy Cenk Uygur did or whatever on the Young Turks about Benghazi. And it is nothing but him shouting into the microphone for 20 minutes, and every third word is the F word. And this is a champion of the left. I'm going to be discussing Benghazi, and I'm going to do it rationally and logically, and I'm going to just simply gonna make it stick. But I don't swear and curse like that because I have respect for my audience, and my audience has higher standards than this. They don't think that it's just a question of how loud can you scream and how many curse words can you chuck in there to show how sincere you are. We expect better than this. Now, I don't know if this has been common knowledge. I've talked about it once or twice before, but generally speaking, when I'm off camera, I swear like a sailor. I just like it. I'm with Mark Twain on this. Profanity often provides a solace that not even prayer can provide. I just find it's a great way to blow off steam, and I'm a high-temperature guy. Maybe in my misspent youth, recovering from being such a dork nerd geek, I may have somehow figured out that swearing a lot made me sound tougher than maybe I really am. Maybe that's the cause of it. I don't know. But I will say this about the universal adjective, noun, adverb, preposition, and everything else. It's a very useful word if you're emotionally inclined. But I don't do that professionally because I have self-control and because I have respect for my audience, and I have an understanding that it actually does in fact weaken my position enormously. Swearing is not arguing. It's the opposite of arguing. It's what you do when you don't have an argument. So back to kind of the issue. Over competitiveness it took me a second. Look, again, you have to understand, I just finished reading The Selfish Gene, and I'm really starting to get into the background of all this stuff. We inherit certain traits, and we inherit certain proclivities and predispositions. But especially humans, by far humans, some animals too, but humans without question. We're free agents. We are a product of our environment. We're a product of our raising and background and culture and all these other things. So there's enormous latitude, probably much more latitude than there is predisposition. So when you talk about people over-competing, there's nothing really that your genes can do about that. People may have a strong inclination to compete, but if you over-compete, I'm assuming the term over-competing means stepping on people to the degree where you're actually harming them, you're impinging on them, you're cheating, you're doing all those things. And when we talk about genetic success, we're not talking about one guy. We're talking about huge numbers of individuals over large periods of time. But my understanding is that over-competitiveness is not selected. You can think of it as somebody who's basically gone too far and is not going to be successful, not the individual, the strategy won't be successful. And the reason I say that is this. If somebody is over-competing to the degree that they are harming people who they should be cooperating with, then that person will be deselected. People won't do business with them. People won't cooperate with them. People won't trust them. People won't like them. People who are over-competitive to the degree where they're, you say, overriding common human courtesy, there's a word for that kind of person. It begins with an A. And those people don't have friends. And Friends are handy, and so are our mates. So certainly in our prehistory, and certainly true today, if you are over competitive to the degree that is no longer healthy, good competition, and by the way, capitalism works because capitalism is not a zero-sum game. Two people free trading wealth that they've generated, both of them end up richer. If it were a zero-sum game, then the most extreme competitors would be the winners and we'd have the law of the jungle. But competition in capitalism is actually cooperation is the strategy. It's the best strategy. You find somebody who overcompetes, and that person's going to be penalized. So let me give you two quick examples. When you deal with human interaction, you are reduced to the prisoner's dilemma. And the prisoner's dilemma is pretty simple. When two people are confronted with a matrix of choices, and the choice being be nice to that person or be mean to that person, I'm simplifying, but not too much. You've got basically four different choices, right? I'm mean to you, but you're nice to me. I'm nice to you, but you're mean to me. We're both mean to each other, or we're both nice to each other, right? Those are the only four possibilities. And so what happens is, if you look at two people meeting one time in the prisoner's dilemma, the way this cooks out is the smart move is to be mean to the other person. Because if you're nice to them and they're mean to you, you get completely boned. If you're mean to them and they're nice to you, you win big. If you're mean to them and he's mean to you, it's a small reward. And if you're both nice together, it's a somewhat larger reward. But it's the smart play is to be mean. The smart play is to be overcompetitive. The smart play is to be a jerk. If you do it one time. But the world doesn't generally work that way. Cities work that way. That's why cities are so nasty. There's anonymity. If you have a pool of people where you have interactions with them repeatedly, then that's called the iterated prisoner's dilemma. And when you get into the iterated prisoner's dilemma, you now have a completely different set of variables at work. Now, you've got something that you didn't have before, and you have reputation. Reputation is what allows civilizations to prosper. And what you find out when you start playing again and again and again and again and again with the same person, there are hundreds, well, not hundreds, but scores certainly of different strategies. Do you screw the other guy all the time? Do you not screw him all the time? Do you always trust him? Do you sometimes trust him? And there are strategies for this, and they put them into a computer and they run them. And the strategy that wins when you play again and again and again is very simply tit for tat. And it's a refined form of tit for tat. Tit for tat means you do to the other guy what he just did to you. And in order for this to rack up the highest points in simulations, some of the rules are pretty straightforward. First of all, you have to be, I forget what the term they use, it's something like, it might have been altruistic. In other words, you lead by trusting them. That's the first thing you do. You lead by trusting them. And if they trust you back, then you trust them again. If they trust you back again, you trust them again. And you've got a nice, stable, win-win situation, and that goes on, and that's how society should function. But if you trust the guy, and then he defaults on you, defects, if he screws you over, basically, then you screw him over. Now then you can be locked into a situation where both parties are screwing each other over, which is not optimal, but it's better than you getting screwed and him getting away. So it's tit for tat. You start out nice, and you do to him whatever he did to you. Now, if he screws you over and you screw him over, and then he's nice to you, you can't be malicious. If he's nice to you, you got to be nice back. And you can't be envious. You can't worry about his score. You can't try to stop him. You just want the best score for yourself. So anyway, all these qualities together basically say that if you have somebody, to go to your question here, if you have somebody who is so over-competitive that he's screwing people who should be partners with, people will not do business with him. They will simply leave him. It's like a badly run business. You can rape your employees for a while, and you can refuse to honor customer refunds for a while, and you can do all these short-term gains for a while, but you'll eventually go out of business. They're going to lose. And in a genetic sense, it's actually even deeper than that, because what Anonymous Conservative pointed out in RK, and what Dawkins also pointed out in The Selfish Gene, is that one of the best ways for competitive success is to cooperate with other competitors. It sounds a little odd. It sounds especially odd to progressive ears, because what they're saying is, wait a minute, you're trying to say that the people who are competing against each other are actually better at cooperating? That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying they're better cooperators because in their own selfish interest to succeed to the limit of their ability, cooperation is a huge advantage. In other words, if I'm a tough warrior, I can intimidate a certain amount of people, but I can't intimidate 20 other warriors who are working together. And the thing about this is, when you have warriors working together, there's an extremely strong sense of policing the group. In other words, we'll let you be part of the club, but you're going to have to sacrifice just like the rest of us. And if we find out that you're cheating, that you're not accepting your fair share of the burden, or that you're running away under pressure, or that you're taking stuff behind our back, or you're not being honest with us, we're going to throw you out, and we're going to throw you out hard. And that's how all these things work. So actually what I'm trying to say there basically, Jacob, is that over-competitiveness is just a random individual thing. It's not got really anything to do with K, although K certainly would make you more competitive than other people. But to the degree that you're impinging on other people, you're violating their rights, and they're going to push back. And it's not a long-term success strategy. Kenny Dragon says, when did Trey Gowdy become so awesome? Your thoughts on him? I'd never heard of him until a month ago. But Trey is the guy who's pushing on Benghazi like there's no tomorrow. He's pushing on Benghazi like he believes it. He's pushing on Benghazi as if he believes that there was a great crime committed and a horrible injustice done, and he wants to see some answers. He's pushing on Benghazi as if he doesn't care what the press thinks about him, and he's pushing on Benghazi if he doesn't care what the progressives and the Democrats or the president thinks about him. I feel compelled to push this in only because I hate seeing unforced errors on our team. But honestly, I know this sounds very trivial and very superficial of me. I like to hope that over time I can convince you that's not my actual nature. But can we do something about his hair? I mean, it becomes... I'm not even saying that the left uses that against him, although they do. My Hillsdale College shirt, by the way. I've been meaning to show that off all day. There it is. It distracts people. It distracts them. And it's so simple to fix. I don't understand it. I don't know if it's an affectation or what. I'm just saying these things distract people from the message. And I don't mean to, go right to that. First time I saw him, I just said, what's with the hair? But he's exactly the kind of guy we need. He's a fighter. And when people fight, they win. Yeah, so Guatemalan Water Snake says, so said the guy with bedhead. I'm just talking to friends now from the basement. When I go out in public, I get a little product in there. So anyway, I admire him enormously. I don't know where he came from. He was not on my radar at all until, like I said, about a month ago. But with that said, more of that. And for God's sakes, man, more of that. Let's just keep it coming. So that's that. Kenny, I don't know much more to say about it, but he sounds like he's serious. He sounds like he's going to carry this football all the way to the goal line one way or another. Maybe he's going to get tackled, but he's going to run like he means it. So God bless him. Isaac Tiemann says, what's on the Bill Whittle reading list? I just finished, as I said, The Selfish Gene. It's extremely, extremely good. It's very, very good. Really, in addition to the RK book, it's really clarified a lot of things for me, and it's a form of mathematics that matters. But it is extremely. I don't want to say it's depressing. I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what's interesting about this, about The Selfish Gene, is Dawkins is an enormous, huge progressive. And in the introduction to I read the 30-year anniversary edition, and in the introduction, he said after the original book came out, he was getting people who were, saying, I'm just going to kill myself. This is so depressing. Because basically what he was saying is that altruism is functionally selfish. That cooperation is for selfish reasons, and that the whole idea is that all of these things are just the genes working to be passed down. By the way, just very quickly, his insight, the one insight that'll never leave me, was that basically what he was saying is, we think of ourselves as individuals and we talk to each other, and I'm Bill Whittle and you're not, and and this is our identity, and this is how we know each other, and this is what we see, and we have genes that allow us to become who we are, and that we will pass our genes down to our children. But he says that's really not the reality of it. He said the reality of it is that we are the replicators, that the thing that exists really is the actual replicator, the genes and the DNA. And he has a term he used that he liked a lot, and he said this, that I liked a lot. He says this individual body I'm in is just a survival machine. That it's a robot that these replicators use because they're immortal. They essentially just live forever, and they just keep slightly changing and tweaking the robotic survival machine that they happen to be in that instant being 40 years or 80 years or 20 years or whatever. Because if it's much less than 14 years, those genes stop. So anyway, it's a very mechanistic book, and it's kind of funny because obviously he goes on many years later, wrote the God Delusion, which I read, and it's just amazing to me how, I don't know if this is just me growing up and thinking about these things all the time, but it's utterly amazing to me how blinded these people are by their own ideology. They don't think they have an ideology. They think they're being purely scientific and purely objective, but basically what he's saying even though we're wired for selfishness, we should all be altruistic status collectivists because that's good for us. We need to overcome our genetic selfishness. And if you said to him, he's a zoologist as well, I think, if you said to him, well, lions should eat grass just like the gazelles and the antelopes, because it's wrong, it's morally wrong for them to kill off these infant gazelles. And lions should just start eating grass and teach their young lions how to eat grass. He'd laugh you out of the room. He'd say, that's not what lions do. Precisely. That's not what lions do. Lions kill gazelles, and humans look out for themselves. And the big breakthrough insight is, so does every single species in the world. Every single one of them. All of them. Bacteria will just eat and eat and eat and make more bacteria. So it's so ironic to me that a guy can be that bright and talk about these things, and then when he's confronted with the evidence of that says that basically conservatism is correct, that we are in fact selfish people, and that if you build checks and balances into a society to protect against yourself, he's like, there he is. He just can't face it. It's like Carl Sagan. He was a huge influence on me when I was much younger and very much more liberal. Huge influence. He talked about critical thinking and his baloney detection kit, and how it works, and all these things that you have, appeal to authority and ad hominem attacks and all this other stuff. And it was so interesting and so profound. It really taught me how to think. I thought, gosh, Carl Sagan has really got it. He knows how to dispassionately look at things, and he applies this baloney detection kit to life, and that's how I want to be. And then Carl Sagan gets out there and basically invents this idea of nuclear winter, which apparently he knew was false, but he thought, well, it's more important that we do something to save humanity. So we're going to add this thing that didn't exist. And he doesn't see it as anti-science. He doesn't see it as destroying his credibility. He doesn't see that the possibility, maybe, that this nuclear deterrent actually worked, just not even on their radar. They're as blind as the most closed-minded people that they accuse others of being. It's worse, actually, because they're so smart that they don't think they can learn anything. I've been getting much smarter since I started doing this 10 years ago, and especially in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, I feel my full power is coming on me. And I started out reasonably smart, or so I thought. The smarter I get, the more profoundly aware of how stupid I am. The smarter I get, the more information I manage to lock together into a matrix, the more I am aware of how much is missing and how wrong I was about things, and how sometimes when you reach a conclusion, that's just where you stop thinking. I find that every day that goes by, I get I get just more and more humble and more aware of my limitations. More and more confident, but more and more aware of my limitations and blind spots, and more interested in trying to eliminate them. Just give you a little example. I was out dinner last night with an actress friend of mine, and she'd been kind of ill for a while, and she had a little necklace on with kind of a, I don't know what it was like a lapis lazuli or something like that. And she says, "This is, these are kind of like healing things," and it's like, and then she immediately goes, "But I know I know you think that's just kind of liberal, nonsense and drivel and stuff." And I said, really honestly, it's like, I didn't think that at all. I would have thought that a while ago, but millions and millions and millions of people have believed this for hundreds, if not thousands, of years, and I'm just gonna. That doesn't mean it's true. But it does mean it's awfully arrogant for me to just assume that it's not, just because I think it's silly. Why would I think it's silly? If millions and millions of people believe in it, then that means it does have an effect on millions and millions of people. Even if it's a placebo effect, it has an effect. See what I'm saying? You really get to the point where it's like somebody pointed out, "Oh, she has magic rocks." Maybe she does have magic rocks. Maybe she does. And maybe the magic in the magic rocks is the belief in the magic. Now, you could say, well, that's not really magic, but it is. If somebody believes in something and it affects their health, then that rock, crystal, whatever, has had an effect on them. Now, needless to say, you can find a world where somebody's got serious cancer and they're putting crystals on their chakra when they would really be much better served by getting severe, intense radiation treatment followed by chemo and live that living hell but survive. So you can certainly go too far in the other direction. And one of the things that I learned last night, she said this about me, and I never heard it really before, but I was talking about a bunch of things. She goes, the funny thing about you is you really think like a warrior, but you act like an artist. You have an emotional core of an artist, but you have the intellectual core of a warrior. And I thought, it's really kind of true. And I'm very pleased and surprised to be here. I've always lived in both worlds, the artistic world and the practical world, scientific world. But ultimately, it's true. I have the soul of a fighter pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I saw something. I almost brought it into the show here. I'll bring it next week. It's a video. It's about 1 minute and 26 seconds long, and I looked at it. I hadn't seen it in years, and I sent it to my friend Lida Loudon, and she said that's the most Bill Whittle thing I've ever seen, and it was the nicest thing she could have said to me. I'll play it for you next week, or maybe I'll post it on Facebook. But in any event, last night was the first time I ever really started to really think about this idea of the warrior poet. And why that archetype has always been so exalted throughout human history. It goes back to all the way through, back to Babylon. What is it about a warrior poet that is so interesting and effective? And I think it's because, I'm generalizing here, I think it's because poets are sensitive and decent and enlightened and all of those things, but weak. And warriors are brave and heroic and strong and altruistic, but brutal somehow, or missing a sort of an insight onto the thing philosophically. But when you put the two things together with this idea of a warrior poet, I think what you end up with is what I like America to be in the world. I like America as the world's warrior poet. And when I think of a warrior poet, what I think about is I think about a person who has the fundamental decency and morality and compassion and sympathy and kindness and goodness to identify with human foibles and to understand that other people are people too, to make that connection to the humanity of other people, to make that connection to the fundamental human transactions that are going on, and at the same time have the emotional and moral strength to inflict fatal violence upon the people that would do harm to good people. I think the fundamental quality of a warrior poet is it is a person who understands poetically the difference between right and wrong, and then has the warrior strength to execute those people who would harm the innocent and the weak and the good. Because you can have this unearned moral superiority about, I am so much better than you, and I sympathize with our enemies. No. If people are being preyed upon by criminals and rapists and murderers, you have a moral obligation to stop them. And if the poet has the moral awareness of it, and the warrior has the physical capability to stop them, then the warrior poet is somebody who has the moral awareness and the same time the strength and the will and the competence and the skill to do violence upon people. I think that's really it. To do violence, to hurt and kill them. It's a very, very dicey proposition, because the poet aspect of the warrior poet understands the consequences of it, understands the responsibility of it, understands the horror of it, the sheer raw responsibility of it. And at the same time, in the full awareness of all of that, has the moral clarity to act to protect the good, because he doesn't have any question about right and wrong. You can finesse right and wrong around the margins, but murder is wrong, rape is wrong, stealing is wrong, torturing people with bolt cutters is wrong. And just for those of you who may be wondering about torturing people, the waterboarding thing, I don't consider that torture. It's unpleasantness, and you could say it's torture, it's psychological torture, but if we do it to our own soldiers, we don't have our soldiers have their thumbs cut off with bolt cutters, and we don't have our soldiers put in metal boots and pour molten lead onto their feet. That's the difference between that. And when this whole thing was hot back 10 years ago during the Iraq War, I really wanted to be waterboarded on camera. I was talked out of it, but I wanted to do it because I have a pretty sensitive, some bronchitis when I was a kid, and so I have kind of a highly tuned gag reflex, and that's why you sometimes have this tickle cough. So I'm not going to tell you for a second that I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to sit there and be a real man and I'm going to, tough it out. No, what the reason I wanted to get waterboarded on camera was so that I could go through this, cry like a baby, just be begging for mercy, basically, and to be to have this stop, drop the weights or whatever, and then have the willpower to say, that was the most horrible, awful thing I've ever been through, ever. Let's do it again. And then let's do it again. I think I've got the will to do that. I really do. I don't care how awful it is. I would, if it meant convincing the country that this is not torture and that we are good people, I would do it as many times as I could till I couldn't do it anymore. And I know it's drowning, and I know it's a fundamental reflex that is exceedingly unpleasant. But I've had to do exceedingly unpleasant things before. I've dated models, you just have to do it. There are guys out there, men and women, getting actually killed and losing legs and getting burned over their bodies, and I know some of them. And to me, that doesn't seem like too much of a sacrifice for me to be basically held down and had water poured over my face to the point where I think I'm drowning when I'm actually not. Because ultimately, when you get right down to it, you're a human being. It's kind of like the Dune test with Paul Atreides. Puts his hand in the thing and endures this incredible burning pain, which he knows is in his head. It's the difference between being an animal and a person. There you go. That's what's on my reading list was The Selfish Gene, and now I'm going to read something that was just recommended to me today called No Matter Where You Go, There You Are, which, needless to say, I love because it's a line from Buckaroo Banzai. But this book, which I was just had recommended to me today, is kind of the antithesis and maybe the antacid for The Selfish Gene, which is very mechanical view of people. And apparently this book is about the power of centering and meditation and finding the kind of calmness that comes over me in emergencies. That's a funny thing about me. I when I get in genuine, actual physical danger, I just turn into a shark. I just, what do I have to do now? What's the next thing I have to do? What's the next thing I have to do? Let's do those things. I just turn into a survival machine. But I get very stressed when I'm not in actual physical danger, and I would like to learn how to get that better under control. So that's what I'm going to be reading next. How are we doing on time? We got a little time. Yeah, we'll go for a little while longer. Kenny Dragon says, what's your affiliation with Truth Revolt? As I mentioned at the top of the show, before we had our psychotic break by me turning off one of the drives and having the great red on white question mark of death, I've been working on this for months. I kept telling you guys there was something I was working on. I couldn't really talk about it. One of the things is moving into the new office, and the other thing was that I really wanted to bring Firewall back, and I wanted to find a home for them, and it's an awful lot of extra work, and so it was nice to get paid for them. So in the same way that Afterburner is hosted on PJTV, Firewall is coming back, which Firewall used to be the property of Declaration Entertainment. Firewall is coming back hosted at Truth Revolt. I own the brand, and it looks like I'll continue to own the brand when this relationship runs its course, which I don't see anytime soon. I love them. I think they're freaking fighters. They're really great, tough, brave people, Jeremy and Ben Shapiro and David Horowitz and all these guys. So I'm just very, very happy to be there, and I'm happy to have the home for these things. So the way it works is I deliver the firewalls to them. It's on YouTube. I embed it. It gets embedded everywhere. It's just that they are living on the Truth Revolt channel, not on Bill Whittle channel. So unless you're a Bill Whittle channel subscriber, you'll see them everywhere. And as long as you get to see them, you get to see them. So yeah, that's been in the works for quite a while. And last week I would have announced it, but I spent 4 days, three days up and 5-6 days of solid work trying to get all those graphics together and so on. So that's what's going on with Truth Revolt. I'm going to skip one or two here. Yeah, I'm going to skip one or two. Zachariah Tiemann says, if Andrew Klavan and award-winning international film and television star Nick Searcy were both drowning and you only had time to save one of them, what kind of sandwich would you make? Ham and Swiss, I think. I don't usually eat that, but I'm just kind of in the mood. I think it'd be really fun. I kid Klavan and everybody rips on Nick, and Nick rips on everybody back. And I'll tell you somebody else who I'd like to have on that first Speakeasy show is Dwight Schultz. Dwight's a friend of mine, and Nick's a friend of mine, to the degree that anybody can be friends with Nick Searcy. And Klavan's a friend, and so on. But the thing I like most about Dwight Schultz, who's a great actor. I mean, he played, obviously he was on A-Team, and he played the only coward in Starfleet. But the thing I like most about Dwight is that you can talk politics with Dwight, and Dwight Schultz will get so amped, he will start shouting at the top of his lungs. He'll just start shouting at the top of his lungs because he feels it so strongly. He actually genuinely feels the outrage and the contempt and the passion for it, and I just love him. I love him. I love being around him, and that makes good TV, and that's what we're going to try and do with this Speakeasy thing, which I think we'll shoot probably in 2 weeks, and certainly we will put the word out for that. So if you're in the neighborhood and you want to come and be in the house, we can accommodate that. Let's see. Jared Mark says, have you realized that the Tiemans brothers stack each other's comments with votes from each other? I had not realized that. So what we have on our hands here, apparently, the result of this team and competitive success in terms of the genetic selection of questions in our giant ongoing evolution of Stratosphere Lounge comment sections. What we have here, my friends, is what we talked about earlier. We have a group of competitors who, in their own self-interest, are cooperating, and all of them are benefiting. So when I found out that the Teamans are stacking each other's questions to raise their numbers, my first thought was, and my immediate thought was, rock on, Teamans. Now, the question is, which one of you out there are man enough or woman enough to use that method against them? In other words, if you really want your questions taken on Stratosphere Lounge, and if we have these competitive selection pressures of only taking the top 5 or 8 or 10 or whatever, and it all comes down to likes and thumbs up, I would think myself that if I wanted to have these questions constantly being the top, I would form a cartel of other members of the Stratosphere Lounge. I would contact them directly and independently, and I would get 5 or 6 or 7 of them together, and I would say, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to vote for each other's questions. And I would out-compete the Teamans brothers, who right now are cleaning all of your clocks. I don't know how the rest of you can face yourselves. I'm supposed to be upset and outraged by this, by cheating on the part of the Teamans. On the contrary, they're not cheating. They didn't break any rules. They are exerting to the maximum their competitive advantage and their fitness to survive. So unless everybody wants us to become the Teamans Lounge from now on, I would say you guys all need to get up and start figuring out a way to not game because game implies cheating. I would start setting up cooperative groups to whack the Teamans brothers. Put them out of business. Put them out of business. Get out there and form a cartel of 30 people so that the Teamans end up being the lowest questions of them all. Should be easy for you to do. We'll find out next week. We'll find out next week whether or not this little mutation I've popped into the meme pool has an effect. Bury the Teaman vote, says Buck.com. I'm half blind tonight for some reason. That's it. Bury them. Beat them at their own game. Outcompete them. And then watch what happens, because if you start doing that, I guarantee you the Teamans will employ countermeasures. And then things are going to get very, very interesting. Very, very, very interesting indeed. So we know the rules. We know what gets selected. Highest ranked votes questions get the incredible honor, and God knows the spiritual satisfaction of being chosen to be read on this incredibly well produced show that's seen by literally scores of people. So bring it on. Let's see what happens. It's kind of fun. Okay, let's see. This is a great question. Caleb Belchak says, "Hey, Bill, how do we make morality cool?" Question mark. I could stop right there, and I probably should, but let's see what else he has to say, because that's really a great question. You said many times that we can't legislate morality, but without it, the culture will continue to vote in leaders that are immoral. What's the best way to reintroduce a moral core? Do you believe that the loss of this morality is the reason that the country is in such dire straits? Yes, I do. Completely do. And the way you make morality cool is that you believe in morality. You believe in it, and you passionately believe in it. And I'll give you an example. I told you I saw a video that was that Lyda said was the most pivotal thing she'd ever seen. If I had it with me, I'd run it now. Several shows ago, we did the video game show, and somebody said, I'm going to just post it on Facebook the next day or two. Somebody said, do you have any game show themes, computer game themes that you particularly liked? And I thought, no, not really. And I thought, wait a minute, hold on a second. What was that thing I played like 12, 15 years ago? It had that killer opening. What was it? And it was a flight sim called USAF. And the opening movie for USAF that played every time you booted the game, I remember really, really liking it a lot. And I remember really liking the music. Well, I watched it again last night, and I got something in my eye. I always get something in my eye when that's playing. I don't cry, obviously, because steely-eyed missile men don't cry, but I got something in my eye, in both eyes, because the music is beautifully, powerfully marvelous, and it's nothing but airplanes, doing all this other stuff, and it's A-10s rolling in, it's it's F-4s coming in with napalm strikes, and it's just airplanes and F-15s and flying high cap, and then they're peeling off, and then right around 45 seconds, this music really, really gets its legs under it, and they cut to an F-16 going evasive, defensive, popping flares, and just doing U-turns, trying to shake a missile off his tail, and I just lose it. I just lose it. And I'll tell you why I lose it. Because this goes to the heart of your question, Caleb. You watch that USAF video. I highly recommend it. USAF intro on YouTube. It's about 1:26 from the video game. You watch that video and you see America at her full power. And what I see when I see this, I know what progressives see. They see bombs going off in the jungle, and they see innocent third world villagers being napalmed by the great industrial death machine. That's not what I see, because we didn't start that war. The communists started that war. The communists started the Vietnam War. The communists started the Korean War. The communists started the invasion of Poland. They invaded Hungary. The communists invaded Czechoslovakia. The communists did all of the stuff in Grenada. The communists did all the stuff in El Salvador. The communists do it all because they're aggressors, because they rule by force and coercion. So what I see when I see that video of U.S. Air Force fighters and fighter bombers is I see the power of free citizens unleashed. I see the best, most decent, hardest working people in the world putting forth their full efforts to defend what they've created for themselves. And when I look at the level of competence, that's what puts something in my eye. That's what makes me so blindingly proud. Is the sheer raw competence of it, just the absolute raw skill spread out over millions and millions of people over decades or centuries, to think that you've got an individual person who's just as real as anybody else on the face of this earth, who's now going through the sky at 500, 600, 700 knots, pulling a 9G turn with an afterburning turbofan behind him, is just belching out thousands of pounds of thrust. All of this being controlled by electrons at the touch of his fingertips, and he is out there using the absolute might of Western science and the fundamental decency to go overseas and fight for freedom, for other people's freedom, and to preserve our own. I believe this in my heart. And things have gotten so bad in this country. That was the default position. Everybody believed it because it was true. You say things like this today, and people are just going to laugh out loud. They're going to just mock you. You can't possibly actually believe that. I do believe it. I do believe it. I do believe it. I believe when I see those videos, I believe I am looking at the forces of freedom amassing the powers that only free people can generate. The Soviets, who we go up against, Soviet aircraft that are exploding in that video time and time again, they are reverse engineers. They ape what we make, and their copies are crap, but they didn't come up with this stuff. We did. And they mass produce it, and they mass produce their AKs, and they mass produce their soldiers, and they mass produce their tanks, and they mass produce their planes. And we don't mass produce people. We don't have cannon fodder. We have citizens who have volunteered to go out and defend their families and come home. And that is different. No wonder we're so much better than them. It's no wonder that we're so much better than them. And by the way, put aside the combat statistics and put aside the fact that the F-15, the F-4, and the F-105 in Vietnam were down to 2-1, maybe 1-1 against MiG-21s and MiG-17s in Vietnam. But the last I checked, I'm sure it's better than that now, the F-15 is 172-0. 172 kills against 0 losses in air combat. F-22 is even better. It hasn't had a chance to be in combat yet, but when they put F-22s up against F-15s, they send them up against 4 F-15s, and then they make it 8, then they make it 16. They still can't touch the F-22. So put all that aside. Put the operational aspects of it aside, and just look at pictures. Look at photographs of Russian military bases. Look at the inside of Russian submarines. Look at the way their airplanes are made. Look at a Soviet airplane sitting out on the ramp. Everything's rusted. Everything's crummy. There's grass growing up between the seams on the cement. The the rivets aren't flush. It looks like it was hammered together by apes. It's just not as good. It's not as good. And it's obvious to anyone that it's not as good. And there's a reason why it's not as good. It's not as good because the people aren't as good. I'm not saying we're better people in the eyes of God. I'm just saying we're better people here on earth. Because all of the people from all of the countries in the world that thought they could do better and make a world better came here. And I think we have a profound, profound, profound obligation to provide a better country than the one that we were given. And we are falling down flat here. So I look at something like that USAF video and I just feel nothing but joy and elation. And I want to be one of those guys. I always wanted to be one of those guys. I wanted to be one of those guys that strap on an airplane, go up at the speed of sound and higher, shoot down communists, and blow them to smithereens. Not personally. I understand they're human beings and have families just the way I do. I completely do. I understand all of that. But they're there, and I don't get to wish them away. They're there. And their goal is to take over the world. And I'm not going to let them do it. I'm not going to let them do it. No. And we are losing this society and this culture because we've been told that we're bad because we're successful. We're successful because we're good. If we weren't good, we wouldn't be successful. And if other countries decided to outcompete us instead of just envy us, the world would be a garden. But they don't. So I mean to protect this thing in every way I can. My vision was too soft to go up there and do that. I would have been an excellent fighter pilot. Yeah. I was going to qualify that by saying I'm not sure I would have had the emotional stability for it, but I would have found it. I would have found the discipline for it, and I'm certainly aggressive enough. I'm hell on wheels in those sims, and I think I told you this. I was at an Air Force event, an event in Nevada, not at the Air Force, but it was about Nellis Air Force Base. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of majors and lieutenant colonels and some captains, all of them with wings, all of them fighter pilots. And I stood up in front of them and I said, I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. The vision in my left eye was a little soft, so I didn't get to go. Lucky for you, because I would have shot down every single one of you. And they laughed. But they didn't laugh at me. They got it. Every single one of them feels the exact same way. You got to feel that way, or else you don't belong up there. It's the greatest part of The Right Stuff, which is a movie I absolutely love, and Dennis Quaid is wonderful in it. And he's constantly saying, who's the best fighter pilot you ever saw? He is, and so is everybody else. Anyway, this is how you make morality cool, Caleb. You believe it, and you tell people you can sit around and talk about whatever you want to. And most people will, because most people are lazy and most people are afraid. But a few people are not lazy or afraid, and those people will go out and do great and amazing things. And they will give their lives to defend the lazy people that are mocking them and trying to stop them anyway. You have to sell morality as a rare commodity, because it is. If you're going to sell morality to people and make morality cool, you're not selling Yugos. You're selling Rolls Royces. You have to make it a luxury item that appeals to very few people, to a very select group of people. You have to make it what it is: precious, rare, and awesome. Because moral people do things like fly through the air and shoot down bad guys. And they do things like build jet-powered monster trucks. And they do things like land on the moon or build their own space program if they didn't have a space program that they wanted. They just go out and build their own, like my friend Bert Rutan did. Or they find a way to make a new kind of a phone that gives you the access to the entire history of the world and tells you where the nearest restaurants are. This is what people do when they're motivated, when they're fundamentally moral. Because, frankly, it's like, does that make Steve Jobs a moral guy? I say fundamentally, I think it does. Steve Jobs, by all accounts, had all sorts of weird personal behaviors, including horrific hygiene, and I don't know what his politics were, but frankly, a guy that goes out and generates trillions of dollars of wealth that wasn't there before, not money for Apple, just generated wealth. He changed the world. He changed the world, made the world an infinitely better place. Of course, that's a moral thing to do. If you can just get people to stop sitting around and depending on other people to help them out, the game's 3/4 won anyway. So you make morality cool by pointing to what moral people do. And look, Caleb, you gotta have the guts to come out and say it, because it's true, and you know it's true, and I know it's true, and they know it's true. They're better. We're better. We're better people. Not better people in the eyes of God. We're not better people morally. We're not like privileged, and we're not made out of angels' wings. But in terms of what we do and what we think and what we believe, it's better. It's better. It's better. America's a better place than Iran. It's better in every way. Because frankly, the only thing that Iran would have going over America was if you want to be a devout Muslim. But you can be a devout Muslim in America. It's better. Its lives are better. People are happier. There's more genuine good in America. And to the degree that somebody in Sweden might say, well, we're happier in Sweden than you are in America, my response to that would be, you're happier in Sweden than we are in America because you're not Russian slaves, because our people are working to protect your people. That's why you're happier than we are in America, because we are carrying your burden for you, and we have been for 60 years now. And we know it, and they know it. Sweden and Finland borders the Soviet Union, borders Russia. They're free, and they have their lovely little, IKEA world, because we pay for carrier battle groups, and we send our people out to operate and crew them. That's why they get to be happy and lovely and clean and all those other things, because somebody else is doing the work for them, and that's us. And that makes us better than them. Not different, better. By any definition. If you have an understanding of morality, and if you go back to Buddha, you find that there are certain moral absolutes that every culture agrees on. Murder's wrong, rape is wrong, stealing is wrong, coercion is wrong, slavery is wrong, all these things are wrong. We're the only... There are a lot of people that talk about freedom. A lot of people get freedom. A lot of people get human rights. But we're the only ones that fight for it. We're the only ones that fight for other people's rights. It's crystal clear. We didn't have to be in Korea, When the communists invaded Korea, we didn't have to go. And we didn't have to go when the communists invaded Vietnam either. We didn't have to go, but we did. Because people were being subjugated. And by the way, I just recently heard about a book or an analysis or something about how we actually had the Vietnam War won. It wasn't like we were about to win it. It was won. It was over. It was done. And then a year or two later, the Democrats basically just gave it up, gave it to them, turned it over. I didn't know we were that far into actual victory over there. I've got a little reading to do over there. A couple more. Zechariah Tiemens, vote stacking genius that he is, says, you have just been elected president of the United States. Due to the existential threat to the liberal big government policies poised by the Whittle administration, California and Hawaii secede from the Union. How will President Whittle respond? Negotiation? Military action? Now, President Whittle will stand on the border of Nevada, high on a hill at Lake Tahoe, the highest point possible, with large spotlights, Klieg lights surrounding him. He will mount a podium and he will wave goodbye with a smile on his face and say, enjoy your socialism. We'll be here when you're ready to come home. That's how President Whittle will handle that, because President Whittle would then get the economy going through the use of the government. And the way I would get the economy going through the use of the government is I would get the government out of the way of the economy. I would just simply stop. I'd say, no, done. We're going to scrap 90% of our regulations. Pick the ones that you like. Pick the best 10% or 25%. We'll keep those. The rest of them are going. I don't care what the 25% are, but we're going to lose 75% of them. So we would do that. We'd get out of the way. California and Hawaii would go off and form their own little socialist paradises with no money and no defense, by the way. And I'd simply wave, and I would smile and say, "All right, California, if you want to run away from home, off you go." And I'd watch California and Hawaii stamp their little feet and go marching down the trail. And I knew within an hour or two, right around dinner time, they'd come back like nothing had ever happened because I ran away too. No, I wouldn't use military action. I mean, I would be, if Texas wants to secede from the Union, because the Union's being so badly run, I can't very well say, well, Texas should have the right to do that, but California doesn't. Things sometimes are just too big. They're too centralized, and they need to be reshuffled, I think, sometimes. So I would just, like I said, I just wave goodbye with a smile and say, if you want to come back, we'll be here. But we're going to get this boat patched, and then we're going to get it pumped, and then we're going to set sail, and we're going to go places. So that's what I would do. Justin White says, it isn't usually in the American nature for the incoming party to punish the lawlessness and corruption, either real or perceived, of the previous administration. Are we reaching a point where doing so may be necessary to maintain the rule of law? If so, what would the fallout of such prosecutions look like? That's a great question, Justin. It kind of goes back to Ted Cruz earlier, so let's assume that somebody actually electable like Ted Cruz is elected in 2016. I think the way to handle this would be to shine a spotlight on the policies and the agencies and eliminate all of these protocols without going after the people. I think that's how I'd handle it. Tempting though it is, because number one, it becomes just mutually assured destruction. And number two, I talk all the time about unearned moral superiority. But there is such a thing as earned moral superiority. And taking the high road, as long as the problem is fixed, is the warrior poet way to go. It's the smart win. It's the best win. It's the swordless win. It's the Sun Tzu win, where you win by not having to fight. You win because you convince them to surrender before you fight. That's the ultimate victory. It's a perfect victory. So yes, you have to shine a light on all of these acts of treason and all of these acts of unconstitutional behavior and out-of-control government, all these other things. You have to stop it, shut it down. But I think you make a point not to prosecute individuals. You just don't. You just say, this went on at the Justice Department. This went on at NSA. Those people have been fired. These new safeguards are put in place. This new oversight committee of citizens is keeping an eye on things, and we just constantly need to keep our feet to the fire. We just need to constantly bring new people in to make sure that none of this stuff is going on. And we need a real press. And that's what I would do. I don't think you win by doing that. I know a lot of people have some problems with Abraham Lincoln. I'm not one of them. His job was to save the Union. That was his job. That's what he was elected to do. His job wasn't to decide whether or not this right existed. That was up to Congress and all those other things. His job was to protect the Union. He was commander-in-chief during the Civil War. But the thing that Lincoln said that I think was one of the most telling things about his character is in the closing days of the Civil War, and I mean the closing days, just probably 2-3 days before he was killed, may have been the day before he was killed, very, very soon before he was killed, he went down to Richmond as Richmond fell. Grant pushed through the defenses in St. Petersburg. Petersburg line broke. Lee retreated to Richmond. The Confederates cleared out of there. Jefferson Davis got on a train, and Lee started his retreat, which would end in Appomattox. But there was a period there of about 24 hours when the Confederates had left Richmond, the capital that we'd been trying to reach, because it was all about taking the capital back in those days. And Lincoln went down in a steamer, and with an escort of, I think, 6 cavalry officers, rode on a horse, surrounded by 6 Union cavalry officers, through the capital of the Confederacy and sat down in Jefferson Davis's chair because he wanted to be president of the whole thing. But what Lincoln said just before he took that ride, he was out on a steamboat with Grant and Sherman. And I want to say one other person too, maybe Sheridan was there. But they were discussing what to do after the war. Would there be trials? Would Jefferson Davis be tried for treason? Would Robert E. Lee be tried for treason? Many, many people were calling not only for them to be tried, but for them to be hung by the neck. And Lincoln just made a gesture like he was shooing hens, like, what should we do with the Confederate leaders, Mr. President? He's just like, shoo. He says, I'd just be happy if they just left the country or went away. And so Lincoln and the North, when that war was over, in any other country in the world, just like after our revolution, and after a revolution, there's mass murders and mass executions. And after a civil war, the winning team commits mass murders and executions of the losing team. But we didn't. One person was hanged during the Civil War, after the war, and that was the commandant of the Andersonville prison camp. And a lot of people think he got a raw deal too. But Jefferson Davis was thrown in chains and kept in a prison for years, but he never got to trial. He was released because they didn't have a case against him. Robert E. Lee was returned to private life and eventually went on to become kind of a spokesman for a university. He never applied for his pardon, so he never voted again, but he was a free man. He was never imprisoned or jailed. And the most amazing story of all is Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy after the war, was returned to the Congress of the Union and served out his term. I mean, what kind of people do that? What kind of people have the fundamental goodness to do that? You've just fought a civil war. How many people were executed after the American Revolution? None that I'm aware of. None. Oh, you guys lost, so you can either join the team or you can move to Canada. What do you want to do? We're not going to start burning people at the stake here. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, Justin, I would say let's keep up that American tradition. Let's fix the problems and let the people that perpetrated it go free, not because they don't deserve justice, but because the cost of that justice would be higher than the gain. 2 to go. Yep. Kenny Dragone asks, is being gay a choice or is one born or raised that way? Does it matter? I'll have 2 things to say about that. One of them is interesting, a point that Jeremy came up with, and I just think is interesting and kind of goes to some of the genetic stuff we were talking about earlier. The bottom line is, Kenny, I don't know, and I've heard advocates on both sides. I am reluctant to say that it's a choice because that's not a choice I could make under any circumstances. That's not like, yeah, you're kind of a Heineken guy, but you might try this, you might like this St. Pauli girls. It's not that kind of thing. It's like that's not, for me, it's not something I would even have an internal discussion about. You know what I mean? It's just not, it doesn't feel like a choice. There are lots of other choices that I make in life. You can choose to be a liberal or a conservative. And, I was a lot more liberal when I was young, but I wasn't a lot more gay when I was young. I just, no. I really feel pretty wired that way. And I think gay people are probably wired to be gay. And I think bi people are probably getting the wires a little crossed there. That would be my inclination. But the fact is, I don't know. This is the thing that I think is interesting, however. This is the thing I think is very, very interesting. I'm going to predicate this argument on the fact that it is genetic and it is kind of wired. I think that's probably very likely. Certainly there's a genetic component that's making it more or less likely. So let's just say for the time being that there is in fact a gay gene. And somebody would say, well, why would there be a gay gene? It wouldn't contribute anything. Well, there are other cases in the animal kingdom where behavior that doesn't seem to be good for the individual does in fact have a survival element to it. But I'm going to put that aside for a minute. Here's the argument that I think Jeremy made that is a really interesting argument. When homosexuality is repressed, when it's considered by society to be a mortal sin and people are either killed or jailed for it. If homosexuality is part genetic or largely genetic, think about what happens. If you are gay, you have to hide it. You're in the closet. You will marry a woman and you'll have sex with them and kids with them, even though that's not where your heart is. And you have these illicit affairs But the thing that's interesting is, if you're forced into the closet and you're forced to have heterosexual sex just as a cover because the homosexuality is so severely repressed and punished, then that gene is in fact being passed down. The homosexual gene is being passed down through the heterosexual sex that you have to have as cover. Now, if you live in a society where homosexuality is completely accepted and everybody's totally okay with it, it seems to me, and it seemed to Jeremy, that this is in fact depopulating homosexuals. Because if it is a genetic thing that's passed down and everybody can be openly gay, then there's no reason anymore for homosexuals to have heterosexual sex. And so, if it is genetic, it's going to be rapidly, not eliminated, but reduced dramatically in the gene pool because of its acceptance. Obviously, homosexuals can't reproduce homosexually, right? So homosexuals have to reproduce heterosexually, and if they no longer have to reproduce heterosexually because of societal pressures, then where does that gene go? Disappears. Kind of weird, huh? By accepting, openly accepting homosexuals, which I'm in favor of, obviously, because I'm friends with Andrew Clavin. But anyway, if that's the case, you may actually be condemning homosexuality to the junk heap genetically. Interesting little thought. One more. Wes Walker says, some say manhood is conferred to young men by father or proxies, generally by rite of passage. Agree? Does lack of fathers explain decline of traditional masculinity? Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. I completely, totally believe that it does. I think, I keep getting back to the genetics because I've been looking at, I'm very interested in the fabric of this, of the flesh, right? I'm very interested in how we're physically constructed. And it's not just us, it's every other animal in the world. It's an enormous part of behaviors, and behaviors are a big part of politics and culture. So I need to know what our inclinations are in terms of what's survivable, what is selected for. So, this is not an RK argument for those of you who are thinking it is. This is a different argument, but it is a genetic argument. Males have a genetic imperative to cheat and to be promiscuous. On one level, you can say it's obviously in the male's interest to inseminate as many females as he can because that's the best way of getting his genes passed down. The female's strategy, the best way for her genes to be passed down, is for her to attract a powerful male who will provide for her and her children and provide not only protection but resources and food and all that other stuff. So you've got two different competing strategies. It's in the female interest to find and hold on to the most high-value male she can, and it's in the male interest to basically fool around as much as possible. Those are the genetic imperatives. And that's what happens most of the time in nature. Some animals pair bond for life because it takes two adults to raise fit, competitive children. So, what does that have to do with fatherhood? What it means to me is that the natural male inclination is not to be a good man. The natural male inclination is to be a cad, is to be a self-centered, it's not just like a non-competitive rabbit kind of person. It's like, just out, what do you do? What you do? I go out and bang chicks all night. Hundreds, thousands of them. Great. A lot of men look up to that kind of thing. But that's not manhood, and it's not fatherhood. You may be the genetic sire of those children, but you're not their father. Fatherhood and manhood are elevated states of masculinity, and of maleness, I should say, because I think the definition of masculinity is actually tied into manhood and fatherhood. So males are males, and males have a natural inclination to want to cheat. But males also have, built into them, a genetic component for protecting the people they love. And that has to be developed. and it has to be explained, and it has to be refined, and it has to be nurtured and led by example, because you've got conflicting impulses in a male that you don't have in a female. I don't think females have conflicting impulses about this, but males have one impulse to go off and run around and just hit all the women they can, but they also have a strong sense of protecting the people they love. And so what the job of a father is, in my opinion, is to make it clear to the son that one thing supersedes the other. It doesn't displace it and it doesn't eliminate it. It's just more important. And we have a kind of a compromise in place in America, in Western civilization anyway, which is a pretty decent compromise. And the compromise works something along these lines. Young man, you will have some time to go out there and get this out of your system. We will give you a few years when you're young to go out and sow your wild oats, and not only will we allow you to do it, we'll actually kind of encourage you. We'll think highly of you. If you're going out on all these dates and you've got cheerleaders there, and we're gonna let you get away with that, and we're gonna let you get away with it at your reproductive prime. But be aware of the fact that most women of value won't play this game with you. This is the traditional conservative view of marriage and relationships, and fatherhood and manhood. But what a father basically has to do is he has to say, all right, now that your mother's not around and just between us Injuns, I'm not going to tell you that it means you don't ever want to, go out whoring around. It just means you can't. It doesn't mean you don't want to. It just means you can't. That the price you will pay will be higher than the gains that you get. Get it out of your system, have the experience, and then do the right thing for the right reasons. Not out of duty, because you won't survive if it's just duty. Some people will. They have that kind of sense of duty. Find somebody who you can live with, who will take care of you, who you like, and protect them. And fathers have to tell sons how to protect people. Fathers have to tell little boys why you can't hit girls, because girls are nasty. They're really mean when they're young. And if ever anybody wanted to get hit, boy, it's little girls. But you can't hit them, not ever, not ever. And you can have a mom tell a little boy that, because that looks like self-serving. You can't hit women, and I'm one of them. When a man says, "You're so much stronger than them," you're so much stronger than them, that's the reason you can't hit them. It's not that you can't hit them because you don't want to hurt them. You can't hit them because you will hurt them. You'll hurt them badly. You may kill them. So you can't. I remember my dad having this conversation with me many times. I remember some girl or something smacking me or something and wanting to hit her back or something as kindergarten or something like that. And I remember thinking, she hit me, I'm going to hit her back. No. Well, that's not fair. It's not fair that you're stronger than she is either. So, no, you can't hit her. Not ever. You can't do it. Not allowed. Never. Not even if she hits you first. Not even if she hits you first. What if she swings and hits me and breaks my nose? You walk away, son. You're not allowed to do it. Well, what? There is no if. There's no if. There's no case. There's no. No. You can't do it. So I didn't, and I don't, and that was put there, and I don't think they're getting that today. I don't think kids are getting that today, and I don't think you can do that single parent. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible. I don't want to say for an instant that there are not single moms out there who have very, very good sons, but I take it back. Of course, it's possible, but it's much harder. That's what a father should be doing. Whenever you see a father yelling, and they don't yell often, I don't think. What I see from a lot of single moms is they're so overwhelmed because they really have to do two jobs. I mean, just being a mom is endlessly exhausting emotionally and physically. But if you have to do all of that and then be the dad on top of it, no, it's just no one has that kind of reserves and strength. So they start yelling and screaming and pumping energy into it. And then the kids get all amped up. I think a good dad, one of the great qualities of a great father and a great man he functions like a control rod in a reactor. His presence doesn't excite people, it calms them down. His presence doesn't inspire anxiety or fear or trepidation. On the contrary, his presence inspires calmness and confidence because he's imperturbable, because nothing affects him, because he's the master of his own emotions, and he is a well-tempered, good man who's in control, and so he doesn't get excited, he doesn't get upset, and when he punishes you, he does it calmly and explains to you why. And when he hits you or spanks you, you don't get the feeling that he's doing it because he's out of control, because that would be terrifying. He's totally in control. It's utterly, completely controlled. It's a very measured dose. It's just like a shot of cough syrup. He's not drunk. He's not chugging a bottle of cough syrup. This is what you're going to get. Here's why. Doesn't make me happy to do this, but I love you, so I'm going to. And that's it. And it's that calmness. It's that sense of just unassumed strength. You're not yelling. You're not raging. You're not saying, I'm the boss here. You don't have to say I'm the boss here. It's no. Everybody knows you're the boss. You're the boss because you're the one not yelling and screaming. You're the boss because you're the one who's quiet and calm. You can't be that guy unless your wife respects you and backs you up. And she can't be a mom unless you back her up. That's how it's supposed to work. But it's much harder to teach a boy how to be a man, because girls will grow up to be women. Their motives are in a straight line. There's no I'm not saying that women don't have needs or desires or things that society's repressing. I'm not saying that at all. But their fundamental biology is going in the same direction as the society's gains. And for men, it's not true. Men's fundamental biology, their genetic success, is going in the exact opposite direction. So teaching a boy to become a man has to be done, and it has to be taught. And it has to be taught in a way that nothing else is taught. It has to be taught through ongoing example over 2 decades. And ultimately, boys will end up doing the right thing, not because it's fun to do the right thing, not because they didn't want to do the wrong thing. They'll end up doing the right thing because the idea of disappointing their father will be worse than any other thing that they would be missing out on. In other words, man, it would be great if I could do this. Yep, but if you do that, that is a cowardly and unmanly thing to do. Okay. That's how the amygdala works. I'm talking about that tomorrow with my Eloy afterburner. The amygdala produces unpleasant sensations in the brain. And the reason that soldiers will go over the top in trenches and walk into machine gun fire with a 90% chance of being killed, the only reason that humans will do that, face near certain death. Why do they do that, by the way? You can't shoot them all. Why do they do it? They're doing it because on some level, and actual soldiers know this better than I do, I understand it, theoretically they get it, they live it. They understand that it's actually more unpleasant, it hurts more, it's worse, it feels worse to stay here or run away than it does to go out there and get killed. It's a more unpleasant outcome. And I feel this in my own life. I'm not so much afraid of dying, I'm afraid of being a coward. That terrifies me. Really scares me. Really, really scares me that after all this talk and all this preaching and stuff, I'm going to find myself in a situation where I'm going to live up to what I've always been saying, and I'm terrified. Terrified that I won't. I'm really, really terrified of it. And I hope I stay terrified for the rest of my life. Because frankly, that terror of being a coward and that terror of doing the cowardly, easy thing is what hopefully will motivate me to do the right thing if that moment comes, and I hope it doesn't. So that's how it works, I think. I really do think that somewhere down the line, when I get all these other plates spinning and everything's established, I would really like to do a seminar for young boys and men. Maybe it's on video or maybe it's in person or something. No girls allowed. Speak the truth. Start by saying just how much superior you are to them biologically, just how much stronger you are, how much faster you are, how much more focused and how much more ambitious you are. These are things you're born with, boys. They've been trying to tell you for 3 generations now that not only are you the same as women, you're inferior to them. You're not. You're different than them, and they possess the miracle, but physically and in many ways intellectually, you are bigger, faster, stronger, and in many times smarter and more focused, more ability to affect your will on the outside world. And with that tremendous gifts come tremendous responsibilities. And you're going to discover over the course of your life the kind of strength that women have, which is the kind of strength that you will never have. They have the ability to endure things and the ability to do things you can't even imagine. But don't let them tell you this business about, we can do everything you can do. They can't. They can't do 2 pull-ups. There's not a high school in America that doesn't have their high school track squad faster than the fastest woman in the world. Certainly every college, most high schools, have at least one, if not the entire team, faster men than the fastest woman in the world. This business of telling boys that they're somehow just defective girls with an ADD problem is going to cost us big, and we got to get it corrected. And the way you do that is you don't tell boys they're less than girls. You tell them they're better than girls, and this is why you have to behave and man up. You have to protect them, and you have to, and you can't hit them. And not hitting them means emotionally. You've got to understand that you have a responsibility and obligation, and you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. Anyway. That's my old-fashioned opinion on these things. If I'd heard myself saying that 10 years ago, 10 years ago I would have said it, but 20 years ago I would have been horrified and amazed. And now it just seems so self-evident to me. And I've seen people who agree with this, and I've seen people who think it's heresy. And every time I go and see a conservative family, especially Mormon families, but deeply religious families, with a dad and a mom, I see families where the brothers and sisters have their arms around each other, and they talk to each other, and they play with each other, and they help each other, and they like being with each other, and they look forward to seeing each other. And every time I see families of liberals in show business with either single mom or a big feminist mom, or a dad who's completely emasculated and unmanned, and a wife who's bossy and bitchy and humiliates him in person and in front of his friends, and I see all of this kind of thing, and I've seen quite a few of those too. I see children who are absolutely lost. There's no comparison in my mind, none. So I have enormous admiration, so we're just very clear, enormous admiration for single moms. And I don't want to sound like I'm talking down on them. They do twice the work that they should have to do, and they do it. By the way, that's one thing we should also say, so we're crystal clear on this subject after all of this. We're better than them. One major area where we're not better than them and never will be better than them, never approach them even close, is that dads walk out on their kids, but moms don't. It almost never happens. You can find a couple of examples that simply prove the rule. When things go south, men run away. Women don't. They have a level of courage that most men don't have. They have a level of morality that most men don't have, because that child is a result of both of them. But when that split comes and dad heads for the hills, mom sticks around, and she raises that kid or all those kids, 9 of them or 15 of them, by herself. That puts her on a moral plane that men will never reach as a group, because men make a choice to stay. Women stay because they're built that way. And in that regard, and in many others, they are not only our superiors, we don't even deserve to be on the same planet as them. So hopefully that clarified things for those of you out there who might think I'm just being a complete chauvinist. I'm not at all. I just know that when you're putting together a team of people, it's good to find out who's good at what, and let those people be good at what they're good at, and let the other people be good at what they're good at. And a good team covers all the bases and picks up the other person's slack. That's what I think a traditional pair-bonded relationship is. And that's the end of that. It's 8:33 p.m. We're 2 hours into the restart. We had an early failure with with the giant red question mark of death by Vectron's golden wings, I've never seen such horror. So anyway, thanks again for sticking with us for episode 70. I'll see if I can stitch those two things together one way or another, and I owe you guys another update, so those things have to get up there. Good Afterburner coming up. Firewall today, one a week. Got one coming up on Benghazi, one on Lost in Space, and the difference between Don West and Dr. Smith, and one on Russia called Bears, Wolves, and Lambs. We can't even see 5 decades into the past anymore. That's how blinded we are. Anyway, guys, episode 70. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Time flies when you're having fun. Thanks for everything. We're going to start getting those membership things online. And this time, instead of blowing our horn for weeks and then taking your money and then delivering 6 months later, this time we're going to put everything on the shelves. It's going to be there ready to go, and then we'll open the doors. We'll see how that works. I got a feeling it's going to work a lot better. So hopefully you like the Office Space. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun thing to watch as we get that thing in line, and we'll keep you updated on all that. But I will see you next week on Wednesday for the Stratosphere Lounge number 71, because as long as you keep watching them, I'll keep doing them. And as always, thanks for all the support, and I couldn't be here without you, and we'll see you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.